on my attention. My countrymen, they love their fiction. Words upon now, it's made with good intentions.
Kia ora and welcome to the special episode of 1 of 200. Today we have, an interview, and the interview is about a direct action that is going to happen in Ōtautahi, Christchurch, on the 8th of October, and it is a blockade of the Aerospace Summit 2025, which is going to be held at Te Pai Convention Centre in Ōtautahi, Christchurch. And today we have with us Peace Action Ōtautahi, who are leading this direct action. And we have Joseph Bray, who is speaking with us. Haere mai, no mai, welcome to 1 of 200. And can you just first start off by introducing yourself, Joseph?
Kia ora, Josephine. Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. My name's Joseph. I am an organizer with a group called Peace Action Ōtautahi, and we're a group focusing on sort of interconnected anti-military, anti-colonial industry within Ōtautahi, Christchurch and beyond. And we're pretty new on the scene, but already we've taken quite a few significant direct actions. And today, obviously, here to talk about the upcoming one on the 8th of October, we will be shutting down the National Aerospace Summit.
Great. So can you tell us about what your direct action history has been? You are, a young activist in Ōtautahi, which is, we're not in Auckland or Wellington, but you're still creating an impact in my observation of what you guys have been doing so far. I'm a little bit familiar with Peace Action Ōtautahi, being an activist myself in the city, but can you just share with the viewers what your experience has been doing direct actions? What exactly did you do in the past? And are they connected with this upcoming action?
Yeah, so we sort of have this thing down here in Christchurch where we're a little city tucked away. How could we be complicit? How are we involved in any of these things? We were Aotearoa's first peace city, and it's sort of the idea that we could be complicit in these industries and these things happening overseas is really out of the public sort of way of thinking down here. But we're trying to really challenge that with these direct links between companies and industries operating in Ōtautahi, and how that sort of transitions into these global conflicts worldwide. So one of, I think, my favorite ones that we've done was early in March this year, we shut down the weapons manufacturer Naya. They just relocated their national headquarters down to just outside of Ōtautahi in Rolleston. And on a lovely brisk morning, we jumped up on the roof and chained ourselves onto the top of this building. This is the national headquarters for this company, Naya, which is an international weapons company. Most notably, they supply the majority of the these sniper rifles to the Israeli Defense Force. So they own Barrett sniper rifles, and they've just opened up their New Zealand headquarters next to Christchurch. I mean, this is such a direct link that just people aren't aware of down here. So that was absolutely one of our favorite ones. We got arrested, charged for burglary on that as well, which was quite a significant change in the way that the police are prosecuting peaceful, non-violent direct action. But with that, we managed to get some great press coverage of who this company is and the fact that they've opened up down here, which was really, really cool. And then in terms of some other really cool direct actions we've done, a lot of them remain anonymous. And so all I can say to that is, look out for us in the future with a few more things. But anything anti-military, all these interconnected, anti-colonial struggles are really the focus of our work down here. And that's something that as a peace city, a designated peace city, we haven't had for quite a while. So it's exciting to be part of that.
Thank you, Joseph. At the start, I didn't really give, an introductory spiel into why, what we're doing, what is the context within which this interview is happening. So I just think I will talk a little bit about that, because as we speak, as we are recording this this interview, it's the 1st of October, 2025. We're sitting nearly 2 years into this declared genocide on Palestinian people. carried out by Israel, but supported and sponsored by the United States and all its vassal states, right? So it is not just the United States, it's also the allies of the United States, and how, United States have taken over geopolitical control around Palestine, right? So this is the context within which we are doing this interview, and you are doing this direct action. And so this is really important to lay out to our listeners that this is connected to that genocide, but also to the permanent war economy that we are currently living under across the world. So we're living in this very weird time when the main means of profits right now, the entire global economy is controlled by this profit-driven capitalist system, which is now, for a great part, is now ruled by these financial markets. So we have moved away a little bit from, the traditional capitalism where we had factory owners and factory workers and so forth. Now the super rich who control the global economy and in fact have captured democracy in our countries, they operate a little bit differently. They have shares they have what do you call a portfolio of shares that they hold, and the most lucrative shares at the moment are in the war industry, the defense industry. So this is, I think, the most important context that we need to set when we talk about this protest and your direct actions. So can you tell us, so you already mentioned how Naya, this this company operating just north of Christchurch, has direct links with the Gaza genocide. And we're also seeing, for example, the current government promoting these companies like Rocket Lab, and promoting this kind of an economy. We're seeing that this has already happened in the US, where the United States has, lagging behind. It's not producing anything, but it produces weapons. And it looks like our government, the national-led coalition government, is pushing New Zealand into becoming this kind of an economy where we are making profits through servicing the permanent war economy. So can you talk about what this upcoming aerospace summit is? Is it, an innocent science summit? Why is it that we do need to oppose it, Joseph?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, I'll first give you a little bit of context with aerospace as an industry. It's always been operated under the guise of innovation, under the guise of developing technology for humanity. And, ever since the first space race, we can see that's very not true. It's all military. It began as a Cold War pissing contest, and further as we go along the line, the ties between the military industrial complex and these defense companies become so overt. And the stage we're at now with the aerospace industry is we've transitioned from launching these large rockets and these large satellites into orbit into a really sinister second phase where we're launching really cheap small rockets with really cheap small satellites into low Earth orbit. This is the real sort of domain of space right now, is low Earth orbit. And just the ways in which this technology has changed within the context of the aerospace industry is unfathomable. Some of these original satellites for imaging of the Earth, we're launching, tons and tons. And just for a bit of context, some of these satellites that we'll talk about a bit further on are now only a matter of 30 kgs. And they're able to be launched up in a pod of about 100, up to 100, and they can take photos of the Earth every hour for every location and provide that information back in real time. But to come back to your question about the US and their involvement in this, it is, I think, far more linked than anyone would really realize without looking into this. We have this understanding of our aerospace industry as this homegrown sort of, we're developing jobs and the economy here with the space exploration. But all I can say to that is this industry would not exist without the US. We are a US satellite state launching satellites for the US. And these aren't just, weather satellites to look at the weather or to look at the coasts. These are military satellites for the US Department of War. The funding that we get from the United States for these launches is just, it is in the billions and billions of dollars. And I think
Yes.
one of the important things to remember with this is that this isn't a small industry in Aotearoa. We are the country that launches the fourth highest number of rockets in the world. And nearly every single one of these rockets is with payloads for the US or the Imperial Corps. The scale of this industry being propped up almost entirely by the United States here is beyond, I think, what anyone is really aware of in this country. So with this direct action as well that we'll be taking, it's really trying to let people know that the industry we have is entirely reliant on the United States military and Department of War. There is no legitimate aerospace industry in New Zealand without those connections.
Oh, really fascinating stuff. I never knew that we were the fourth biggest launcher of rockets, and I mean, very important connection to make between, the war industry. I'm really glad that they, renamed that department from Department of Defense to Department of War. It kind of does, encompass what they really are. And one thing I'm just like thinking aloud with you, Joseph, here. One thing that's really interesting for me is the fact that the capitalist empire, you mentioned the imperial core, and the imperial core controls the rest of the world, obviously in an undemocratic way, by using the military, right? So the United States has the largest military network in the whole world. And, many analysts have shown how United States is the most violent nation on the planet since World War II. So this is a very dangerous thing that we are participating in. There's questions that listeners need to ask. Do we want to be part of this violent system? And what is this violent military being used for? I mean, they use the guise of, freedom and all that, democracy, but they're using this military not for the democratic interests of the people in the United States or here in Aotearoa. They're using it for the interests of of the ruling class, the top 1%, who want continued and unobstructed access to the resources of the world, right? Our whenua, our moana, our minerals, our human and non-human resources. They want to continue privatizing and profiting from it. And when they cannot, when they face a resistance, that's when the military is important, right? They will conduct coups, invasions, genocides, and so forth to enforce this, the will of the parasitic, ruling class who currently own 43, the top 1% own 43% of the wealth in this world. The other interesting thing about this, Joseph, is the fact that is this industry that we are currently confronting with, which is profiting from, bombing children in Gaza, they're not selling in the free market. They are selling to governments. So like you said, that's a really important connection that the listeners have to make, I feel, is that this is not like a market where, people are buying food or clothing or basic services they need. This is being sold to governments. Number one, they will create tensions across the world, raise tensions, military tensions, and then they will create this notion that all countries need to increase defense budgets. And the biggest, obviously, is the United States that spends trillions. It's not even billions, trillions of dollars they're spending. So it's like we've got the situation where taxpayer money is being funneled into the hands of these corporations, these arms corporations. It's really a scam where our money is being given to this death industry. So thank you for that earlier, your thoughts about, where the satellite industry is now, what its purposes are. Just wanted to ask you a little bit more about, so you mentioned Naya. What other companies are involved from New Zealand or are going to be involved in this particular aerospace summit?
Yeah, so the main one that's going to be on people's radars, obviously, is Rocket Lab, which it was a New Zealand-owned company until they moved to the United States to do more business with the US military. But of course, they still have a launch pad here in New Zealand, up on Mahia Peninsula near Hawke's Bay. This is New Zealand's only rocket launch pad, so anything we launch from this country is coming out of that site up there on the North Island. And a lot of these launches are really, really concerning. There's very deep ties to Israel, to the US military, and launches that are violating our nuclear-free policies and our obligations under international law. So the main concern with these Rocket Lab launches, among many, is the satellite called the Gen 3 satellites for Black Sky. Now, these are really, really small, as I've mentioned, satellites. These ones are about 80 kgs, and Rocket Lab is launching them up into low Earth orbit, and they take about a picture every hour of the Earth and send that image back to their customers back down here on Earth. And it just so happens that one of those customers that Black Sky sells these images to is the Israeli Defense Force. So we know that the IDF or the IOF has a real-time aerial view of Gaza being relayed down to them every single minute of every single hour of every single day because of this constellation of Black Sky satellites. This is information that they're using to target civilians, so like hospitals and refugee camps. There's no mistaking with the resolution of these images. Each of these pixels is 35 centimeters by 35 centimeters in these aerial imaging. So you can determine military convoys, of course, but you can also determine tent camps and hospitals and schools. And of course, that's exactly what Israel's doing. And the concern for us at Peace Action Ōtautahi, but in the wider community in Aotearoa, is that we're launching these from New Zealand, from our launch pads in Mahia Peninsula, that this imaging technology is going straight to the Israeli Defense Force and is enabling genocide and war crimes to take place. And there was some brilliant work done the other month by the PSNA, who, with our legal team, has referred Peter Beck, the CEO of Rocket Lab, and Judith Collins, among others, to the International Criminal Court for enabling genocide. We look forward to the outcome of this, because it's very, very clear that both Peter Beck and Judith Collins, who signs off on these payloads, are extremely aware of what's happening and where that technology is going. Judith Collins, she was asked more recently if she was aware that Black Sky had a contract to supply these images to the IDF. And in response, she said, "Yes, I am aware. National interest for payload permit applications is reviewed on a case-by-case basis." So she signs off on every single one of these military payloads and these Black Sky payloads that are going up and sending information back to Israel. It's absolutely disgusting that it happens full stop, but the fact that it's happening from New Zealand when our legal obligations for launches in New Zealand.
So yeah, it sounds like it's going to be, it's basically surveillance. It's surveillance of human beings. It's surveillance of citizens. And we know what this technology does in the hands of, these kinds of reactionary governments across the world. At the moment, we're seeing Palantir Technologies, who were involved in providing AI for the genocide in Gaza. They have big contracts with the United States, now with the UK. The NHS data is going to be managed by the same technology that was used in the genocide in Gaza. So this is really concerning, especially if you are, interested in people power, in improving our communities, in developing our communities, and so forth. If you're an activist, if you're a political, thinker, if you're involved in your community, and you care about the community, we are all under the radar of these satellites. So it's really, in my view, what it is a confluence of political power and corporate power. So coming together in this kind of a class war against people. So, I have this tendency of theorizing, over theorizing. And this to me sounds just like a class war. And this is them becoming more and more powerful by, taking all these kind of technologies into their arsenal and becoming even more difficult as a challenge for us to overcome.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
It's extremely terrifying to know the amount amount of satellites. BlackSky is just one of these companies that is launching these high frequency and high quality imaging satellites into the atmosphere. And this technology is being launched under the guise of aerospace, which is probably the most insidious part of this operation, where, as people of Aotearoa or anywhere on the globe that are being surveilled with this technology, we're being told that it's for humanitarian purposes. For instance, BlackSky advertises their technology as being able to monitor coastlines or monitor wildfires, while at the same time selling that technology to the IDF. So the concept of dual-use technology is really, really intertwined with aerospace, so much so that almost anything that's getting launched into, low Earth orbit or outer space, it has these military applications, and often the ones we launch are for the United States or for Australia. And it's really, really concerning that we can't seem to, as a general public, dissolve the ties, these mental ties that we have between aerospace and the military, and understand that one cannot exist without the other.
Yeah, and it's just zooming out and looking at what's going on at a global scale in terms of inequality, in terms of instability, wars, genocides. We can see that these are all connected. This aerospace industry summit that's happening in Aotearoa in Ōtautahi is actually connected to all these phenomena happening across the world. The fact that the rich are getting richer, the really rich people, the top 1%, they own 43% of the wealth in this world. And, there's a lot of destabilization, militarization, the threat of a third world war, nuclear winter, all these things happening. These are connected. And it's also connected to the fact that these highly empowered parasitic class are also lobbying to destroy our rights, right? Workers' rights, the safety nets that we have are being slowly eroded or rapidly eroded. The fact that the healthcare sector is becoming increasingly privatized. So they've got their hands on all of these very important services, and they've created this militarized permanent war economy where through all these ways, whether it is through high rents, low pay, dismantling of workers' rights. It's a funneling of all our energies. The value that the working class creates is getting concentrated in the hands of the ruling class. So identifying that this is indeed a class war and they are stacking themselves up to destroy us. This is really important for us to know. And, shamefully, the government of New Zealand felicitated Peter Beck, the CEO of Rocket Lab, in the New Zealand Parliament, and he's got the knighthood as well. We must ask questions about the king's honors and so forth. This year it was given to Ruth Richardson, some of the worst finance ministers in New Zealand's history, who led directly to the rise in child poverty and so forth. So who is this that the establishment praises and accepts and felicitates? I think that we need to look really carefully at all these systems and who it benefits and what impact it has on the people and the planet.
And it can be so hard to understand with these specific industries in Aotearoa, like our aerospace industry, for instance, and how they actually funnel into the system. And especially when this technology is being launched under the guise of, the betterment of humanity, it can be so hard to understand the ways in which the working class is being subjugated by or through this technology, rather. And it's happening. This is something we celebrate in New Zealand, unfortunately. But just to run you through a couple of the other people at this aerospace summit, I think the ties become really, really clear for what this summit actually is. So as a featured speaker spot, we have Blue Origin, which is Jeff Bezos's space company, of course. Just recently got a multi-billion-dollar deal with the US Department of War. That's brilliant. We also have Nova Systems, one of Australia's largest defence companies, who's going to train you up under the Guided Missile Ordnance Act, so you can launch missiles with your qualifications there. They also develop remote and autonomous defence systems. These companies and these people that are attending the summit do not have the interests of mitigating climate change or understanding how wildfires spread or targeting specific populations with aid or more funding, which is what they all claim with the satellite technology. The one singular aim of this technology is to surveil the working class and everyone. The singular aim of this technology is to launch it up with the express consent of the working class and get us to a point where we are comfortable with the surveillance that comes from space, to get us to a point where we're unable to do anything about the fact that there are thousands of satellites in space, and to get us comfortable with the fact that we need to be spying or we need to be surveilling in order for our country to be secure or to be, in a position, a militarily advantageous position. And it's none of these things have to be true, but through the aerospace industry and the military industrial complex, we're being convinced that they are. And that's why it's really, really important that, and maybe it's a bit late to nip in the bud, but it's important that we bring this to light and shut down this convention.
Yeah, yeah. So the next question I have for you, Joseph, is about the role of universities and in what direction the government is taking the university sector into with these kinds of conventions. So our universities are spaces where we need to promote public debate, critical thinking, critique of power. This is a key function of the universities as critics and conscience of society. But this current direction, the orientation of the government, pushing us towards, taking the begging bowl towards this private sector, and especially the aerospace and defense sector, is just really dangerous and something that we at the university should be opposing at all costs. So this particular convention that you are going to blockade, Peace Action, or as leading Peace Action Ōtautahi, does it have links to the education sector?
Josephine, very, very strong links, unfortunately. These links between, first of all, Rocket Lab and the University of Canterbury, for instance, are to the tune of tens of thousands of dollars in investments in postgraduate research, for Rocket Lab, internship pathways. These are really, really concerning just between Rocket Lab and the university itself. The other links that we get here with this aerospace industry is that the university gets a lot of money for research and development in this sector, and it will never stop like it has been with the Marsden Fund. Myself, I'm doing research in conservation, and of course there's no money in that, but there is hundreds of thousands going into aerospace development. And in return, the university is a sponsor of this aerospace summit to the tune of tens of thousands of dollars to get their professors and students in there talking about all these different quote unquote aerospace projects, which, as we know, is just a sort of thin veneer for the defense industry. But this link between the University of Canterbury and the University of Auckland, especially as well, and the aerospace and defense industry worldwide is really, really concerning if that's where lots and lots of this research and development money is coming from, which it is.
Yeah, and I have a friend, Sean Troth, who did an analysis of this link between the weapons industry and the universities in Australia. And there's this term that has been developed within this the literature, and it's called the University Defense Industrial Complex. So.
Absolutely.
And it looks like that's creeping into Aotearoa as well. And this is ultimately what all of this is doing, is it's not only a threat to, democracy, freedoms, the threat to our environment, threat to workers' rights and so forth. It's also ultimately, a threat to Tino Rangatiratanga sovereignty over here, which is guaranteed by Te Tiriti. So this is also a question of Indigenous sovereignty. It's a question of our freedoms as well as human beings on this planet. So it's really alarming that this is happening. Another thing I wanted to ask you, I mean, this is great. We had this great conversation about the action itself. I want to ask you, Joseph, on a personal level, what brought you into activism? What was your moment of, if I can say it, radicalization?
I forgive me if this is a bit gory, but the moment I remember getting into activism was late in the picture. It was at the end of 2023, and it was the first time I'd ever watched somebody die, and they were shot by an Israeli sniper rifle and crumpled to the street in the middle of, rubbled Gaza. And I remember that being such a, significant driver of change within my own mind. But then with that came the understanding that the company that sold that sniper rifle to that Israeli soldier had just opened up in Christchurch. And the understanding that the only way that things change in terms of, these industries is direct action that targets profit. And after that, the switch is flipped, and it has for so many other people in Aotearoa and worldwide, that the only way that these industries and these companies and these governments are going to listen to the people is with the direct shutdown of the profits, of the motives of capital. We need to shut down the factories and the industries that supply this. And the only way we can do that is if we have people and bodies on the line.
So interesting. So it was actually Gaza that was your kind of turning point in terms of you as a human being, thinking about what you want to do, in the future. That was back in 2023, and in the last 2 years, you've already been engaged quite. You've been in the thick of it, haven't you? At the front line of the struggle in Ōtautahi. So before that, for example, like before you saw this gory event of a sniper, were you already asking these questions? Were you involved in any way? Yeah, and to what extent did it, radicalize you? Did you start thinking about it in terms of, okay, this is not right, and so what is the larger picture? Is that how you started thinking about it? I'm just really curious.
Absolutely. I think for me, it's, the first understanding was empathy. Even before any of this activism, within my life began, it was the understanding, that was taught from a very young age through the public school system, which of course is being absolutely degraded in terms of understanding these issues with an empathetic balance. But I think I was always primed for radical direct action, which it makes so much sense. I think it was just when you have the people around you, especially that can, are with you to take you into this sort of, sphere of change and direct action is really, really important as well. But I think it just all starts with the understanding that what we do in our lives matters, and being the best people we can be for people worldwide isn't something that we should shut ourselves away from just because we're in a small country on the other side of the world. A small country that launches spy satellites for the US military. The connections here are just so deep.
Yeah. And it's, obviously you've been involved in the Palestine solidarity actions in Christchurch and the protest movement. We work together. We've been marching together for 2 years now,
Absolutely.
Joseph. So you can see the connections, obviously, but also sometimes people ask me the same question about the small size of New Zealand, the fact that we're only 5 million people here at the bottom of the world. Why are you, doing activism here? Is it going to be effective, and so forth? And this question is posed to me a lot. And also for me, coming from India, for example, being kind of engaging. I remember, like, in the first week that I came to New Zealand, I attended the campaign launch of this party called Mana. And so people were quite surprised that, whoa, you've only been here a week and you're already kind of at a campaign launch. And I also get this question, why do this in New Zealand? Why not elsewhere? And to me, you've mentioned your answer, which is, New Zealand is implicated in this global imperial system, which is what I like to call it, an imperial system, because it is, a system, it's a network, a military and other institutional network, right? So it's military, it's also financial institutions, financial control, the dollar control of the world, how that links to the domination of the Middle East, for example. Um, uh, it's also, financial institutions like the IMF and all that, but also spy networks that New Zealand is part of. One thing that I've understood from learning about imperialism and anti-colonial struggles across the world, which is my area, is that the biggest barrier for people's liberation across the world is actually this empire. It's this empire which wants to continue extracting the resources and labor of the world, not for the benefit of, humanity, but for this principle called profits. And
Absolutely, it is.
yeah, and it's just being in New Zealand can be in some ways advantageous. And this is what I want to urge the listeners to also think about is that we are actually part of the imperial core. We are linked to the United States. And if we're able to actually change this, make actually New Zealand a sovereign and independent country, Tino Rangatiratanga, then that will be a blow to the imperial system. We will be one less, bead in that necklace or whatever, the chain
Yeah,
of the global
absolutely.
imperial system. And no matter what we do in the global south, I'm part of, for example, the leftist movements in my country. One thing we've faced is that whenever we make gains, the CIA appears and derails it.
Yep.
The
Yeah.
CIA, they buy out, the ruling class, and obviously the ruling class. We are up against not only our own ruling class, but also this global imperial system,
Mm.
which has a vested interest in destroying people's power, right? So that is my answer to the people who ask me that question. But the other thing is also that I wanted to discuss with you before we, conclude is how science and how education and research gets corrupted through this system, which is based in profits, right? So,
Mm.
what is your view on that? Because in New Zealand and across the West, there's this idea that Western systems are superior because we are rational and logical and all that, and we base it on science and things like narratives. You mentioned an interesting discursive tool, tool they use, dual use technology. So it's kind of like
Hmm.
couching in weapons, but also it can potentially help humanity. But how, in your view, do you think that the science research that's happening, or in general research that's happening, when it is dependent on profits, is it really, unbiased and logical and rational? What's your view on this corruption that happens within research and science and technology?
I mean, there's absolutely it is. If you are getting paid to do something and the only source of funding you can get to do that research is coming from a company complicit in genocide, then that research isn't going to get done without that money. And if you're then taking on that money, there are expectations from whoever's funding you. The separation of private industry and tertiary education especially needs to happen in terms of these private companies that we know have these ulterior motives. It's not about advancing humanity. It's about advancing profit for the few. As you always so brilliantly put, Josephine, it's just we can't develop these systems that benefit all if all the research we have and the only funding we have for that research is coming from the people that have the money and the assets and the resources to do that. And I wonder what your perspective on that is as a lecturer and as an educator.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm on the same page with you. I don't think there is such a thing as a neutral, science. Science is sitting within a context, and the context and the power dynamics within that context shape what we understand as science. And so instead of, for example, um, I mean, I think that profits distorts science and innovation in so many ways, right? I'll give you a good example of what happened during COVID. So on the one hand, there is this research happening, but these research is happening funded publicly. But then once they find a treatment for a disease, then it becomes under the private capitalist model. The publicly funded research then gets privatized, right?
Yeah.
And then once it gets privatized, it is then under this global kind of capitalistic framework. Again, another arm of the global imperial system is the control over science and technology and patents and so forth. And so the patents get monopolized by the corporations. And then even though we have cures for diseases or treatments for diseases, they don't reach the people that need it the most unless they're extremely rich. So we saw this happen many times during the AIDS epidemic in Africa. 10 million excess deaths happened, even though the antiretroviral treatment was available, because this private industry captured the research. It was beyond the reach of most people in Africa to do that. So people unnecessarily suffer and die. This is science and technology could be used for the benefit of humanity. Instead, it is being used for the profits. And that's one aspect of it, what happens after research. But when research itself is funded through this private model, then, like you said, it's completely distorted. This is the problem, right? Like at university, we see a number of dairy industries trying to fund chemistry research. Like I have a friend who did a chemistry PhD, and he was like, I got this money for no reason from a dairy industry, and now I need to show some results that align with them in order to get this funding for my PhD. So I was just like shocked, and he's like, my research has not much to do with it, but because they're giving me funding, I have to. So this is what happens. And we saw this happening in nutrition research, for example, how the food industry distorts our understanding of what is good nutrition and so forth. This is this is a major issue, and this is a major issue across fields, not only within sciences, but also in social sciences. I mean, the Western academy, the university, we would think that it would be a bastion of resistance against imperialism and colonialism, but no, it actually supported the racist theories that justified colonialism, justified Nazism, and so forth. A lot of this came from the university. So this is like the confluence of and this is the other thing, how do we understand racism, right? It's not some random prejudice. It was planted and it was propagated in order for one purpose, to take the resources and labor from the people in those regions. And I've read this amazing quote from an analyst who says that Islamophobia wouldn't be so bad if that region, Muslim majority regions in the Middle East, didn't have so much oil. Then do you know what I mean? So I think it's really important to make that connection between the material world, the material economy, and how it functions, and these sorts of tendencies like racism and all that, which justify extraction, right?
So, very well put.
Yeah, I don't know. I went on a tangent there, but it's wonderful to chat with you, Joseph. And I really hope that this goes, it succeeds. And can you tell the audience, the listeners, where they can find out about your work and how they can join if they would like to join?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are at peace.action.ōtautahi on Instagram. That's the best way to find out about us. And for this action, we are publicly announcing that we'll be blockading, which means that if you're listening to this and you're thinking that, wow, this industry sounds like a proxy for the US military, because it is, and you're wanting to get involved, then absolutely sign up. There's a link in our bio to get involved with this action. If you want to join the blockade, take any action in that sort of way, please get in touch. And we note on the conference as well, just to tie it back into the United States as well, that we have people at this conference speaking from, we have the director of the Department of Innovation as under the Department of War. So we have officials from the US Department of War coming, the US Civil Aviation Authority, the deputy director of NASA Ames is coming, all these US-backed companies as well coming in to speak. We have a former FBI agent of 10 years and he was the head of global something at Palantir as well for about a decade. He's a featured speaker as well. So the links here are really, really clear between the US military and our aerospace sector. I think I've always said that, to me, it was first described that the aerospace sector is, a wolf in sheep's clothing. But I think it's, you look at it more and more, it's a wolf in a slightly less bad wolf's clothing. Aerospace has never been a properly separate thing. We've never been exploring without some level of human cost. And now that human cost comes in the form of the targeting of civilians in Gaza, and that's our complicity here in Aotearoa. We're also blockading. Peter Beck is going to be coming there. So that's the CEO of Rocket Lab, a New Zealand citizen, who is coming to talk about how his rockets are amazing and will drive the New Zealand economy forward, except that all his payloads are for private companies or foreign militaries. And he has also been referred to the International Criminal Court by PSNA Aotearoa for these launches for Black Sky that are sold to the Israeli Defence Force. And then along with that, Judith Collins, everyone's favourite minister, our Minister for Space and Defence, is also going to be there, and who has also been referred to the International Criminal Court because she is the person that signs off on each of these Black Sky launches. The New Zealand Defence Force has a speaking slot at this conference. I don't know why it's an aerospace conference. There must be some ties there, but I couldn't read into that at all. But the essence of this is that we will not let these people do these deals behind these closed doors. This is an international gathering of some of the most complicit people in war profiteering and genocide complicity around the globe coming to Ōtautahi Christchurch. And we have well more than 100 people already signed up, willing to put their bodies on the line and shut down this conference, which is really, really amazing to see that the tide is turning in terms of public perception of aerospace. People are beginning to realize that, hey, this isn't a grassroots independent industry that's spawned in New Zealand to further our economy. It is to enable us to do our duties as a country in the imperial core at the whim of the United States. And it is just one quick other thing to mention about the aerospace conference as well, is that in part of our new defense budget plan announced, which was that $12 billion over 4 years, up to $450 million of that is going towards lethal drones for our New Zealand Defence Force. That is a really, really scary thing to happen. The changes in warfare in terms of transitioning into these drones and the satellite imagery is terrifying in itself. And we're really worried about what these companies are going to do with these, multi-million-dollar contracts they'll get. One of the companies that is coming to the Aerospace convention on October the 8th is called Aero AI, and they are making AI-powered drones for warfare, among other things. That's that dual use again. And it is absolutely terrifying to know the ways that AI is going to be incorporated within the aerospace industry. I am going on a tangent, but just to bring it back to Black Sky as well, that imaging technology, they have incorporated AI analysis into that, and that can determine groups of vehicles and military equipment without anybody having to even look at that. We're getting to the stage in warfare where no human has to be involved in the targeting of civilian infrastructure and, displaced refugee tents within Gaza. It's all done through AI. You don't even have to look at these images to know that these civilians will be killed. So it's a terrifyingly scary industry. It is only getting larger. The government is pumping billions and billions into this industry. It is about time that public perception shifted and that people took direct action against these companies.
Yeah, great points you raised there, Joseph. So it's like our money, 12 billion of it going into this sector. And from what I understand, the government is not averse to buying the weapons that were experimented on the children in Gaza. So this is our money. So we have democratic control to hold this government to account. So in my view, this is a responsibility to speak out against this industry, a democratic
Absolutely.
responsibility of the people, because it's our money. And they're cutting all these sorts of worker guarantees and rights, creating sanctions for the poorest in this country, and at the same time they're giving billions of dollars to this permanent war industry. And where is this going to go? What kind of future do we have for our children and grandchildren? This is looking pretty bleak. Think about, I mean, not only the human cost, the environmental cost, the ecological cost, the resource cost, all these resources, like the minerals that are used for this technology, could be going into addressing our problems. And instead it's going into creating robotics and AI that is killing children, basically. And so those two AI technologies that I mentioned before that were used in Gaza are called Lavender and Where's Daddy. And these are the two AIs, very sinister, right? Using that word, it's about parents of children and looking whether they're home or not, and Palantir is involved in it, and this is really horrible. So this is a democratic responsibility of us to ask where this money is going. Is it going to be in our interest and so forth? Obviously, it's not, right? This is a death industry, a death machine coming to our doorsteps. And so thank you for spending that time with us, Joseph, to talk about your direct action. We from 1 of 200 wish you the best. And so I will put down the links to Peace Action Ōtautahi under this podcast. And thank you once again. I hope the listeners enjoyed this special episode of 1 of 200. Ka kite anō.
Thanks so much for having me, Josephine. I'd just like to leave your listeners with one quick fact about another company that's coming to this aerospace industry. It's a company called Reflect Orbital. If you want to get depressed about late-stage capitalism, it is this company to look into. What they're doing is launching massive mirrors into space to be able to sell you sunlight during the nighttime. If that isn't this is the latest stage of capitalism we could possibly get into. If for no other reason other than that this is just some hellhole that we're living in where this is a reality, please do support the Action and Peace Action Ōtautahi's work. It's been lovely to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
If artifice is art, then I'm living a pointless life, but learning all your lessons. Fucking politics, there's no distinction. The road's upon now. It's paid with good intentions, and I'll admit that I'm at a loss for what to say when they quote this as a cost we ought to stay. 'Cause I live amongst the people every day in this vindictive, forgetful fucking rain.